Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, and you are listening to episode number 8 of the Future is Bright podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with Meredith Ritchie, SVP GC, Chief Ethics Officer and Chief Government Affairs Officer at Alliant Credit Union in Chicago. We discussed her career portfolio development from starting as a paralegal to then becoming a private practice attorney to working within state government and now being the general counsel of a top 10 U.S. credit union. We discussed her exciting projects and roles at Alliant, as well as her passion to develop people. Stay till the end to hear her work in volunteerism and so much more. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes and YouTube. A bit more about Meredith. While at Alliant Credit Union, she served in several roles, including Associate General Counsel and Ethics Officer, Interim Chief Human Resources Officer. She currently leads the Legal and Audit Departments, the Ethics Program, the Government Affairs Program, and is a member of the executive team. Prior, she served as State and Local Corporate Counsel at Accenture. She was also the Deputy General Counsel for the Illinois Department of Central Management Services. She was the Assistant State's Attorney for Cook County, Illinois, and an Associate Litigation Attorney for a Chicago law firm. Meredith is also a member of the DePaul Law Dean's Advisory Board, CU PAC Board, Alliant Credit Union Foundation Board as President, and Fenwick High School Board. She received her bachelor's degree from Hamilton College and her law degree from DePaul University College of Law. Welcome, Meredith, to the Future is Bright podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today.
So, it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the past, I would say, COVID couple years and having a chance to interact with you with the Chicago ACC. Really excited about this conversation because you got one heck of a career and journey that you've been on. And so look forward for you to share your story, that it may be inspiration for others as they are wondering about, what they can do. So I understand that you are a Chicago native. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And are your parents from Chicago as well?
You know, no, not originally. They started off in Texas and in Indiana, and then my father was transferred for work when I was an infant. So I grew up in the Chicagoland area.
And was a career in the legal industry always something in your mind going to college, or how did that come to the picture for you to go to law school?
Right. So I would say it was not like a childhood dream by any means, but there were a couple of events that happened that really made me take a step back and say, the law could be an area for me. And one of those pivotal moments was when I was working as an intern for a radio station. And
Interesting.
one of my jobs was to actually write copy that the on-air talent would read as a news story. And so what I would do, I would follow her to court. Her name was Liz, and I would follow her to court for trials, and I'd take notes of the trials and really sort of summarize the key points of the trial. Headlines, write it up into copy, give it to Liz, and then Liz would literally go to a phone booth and read her copy over to the station on air. They'd hook her up on air. And so that was really fun. So being able to see the inner workings of sort of high visibility trials. And of course, that was before my senior year in college. So that was the
Oh, wow.
first incident that piqued my curiosity.
Oh, wow. And so was it your interest to be in the courtroom and be a litigator and a trial lawyer?
Well, after that, I started thinking about that. Before that, I
Yeah.
was headed into broadcasting.
Okay.
And so that piqued my curiosity. So if you fast forward about a year at the end of my senior year of college, I was actually getting offers in broadcasting.
Okay.
And most of those offers were to be, on air, but for the most part, chasing tornadoes in Georgia and Florida.
Oh my goodness.
And so I had to make a decision, move back to Chicago and be around friends and family for the next year or take one of the jobs. I chose Chicago, which of course then meant major market, no broadcasting right away. And I needed to find a job. So I took a job as a paralegal with a small law firm.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah.
And after about 6 months, my boss said to me, the partner at the firm said, you really seem to understand law. And he said, have you thought about law school? And I said, interesting. This is sort of the second time it came up. I think I better take the LSAT and apply. And that's how it all started.
Yeah, such a great journey. And um, knowing you went to DePaul University College of Law, um, and you ended up as a litigation associate at Peter Cassidin firm. Is that how you say it?
Kasdan, yes.
Cassidin firm. Okay.
Hmm.
And tell us a little bit about that journey from private practice, and then you end up working in government. That transition.
Sure. So, and I'll try to give you the shorter version of the story, but basically, um, I had met somebody at a football game. I was at a football game, and the gentleman sitting next to me at the football game was a supervisor at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office.
Okay.
And so we were talking law. He found out I was a lawyer. He was a lawyer. We started chatting. And at the end of the football game, he said, listen, we're always looking for talented people at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. If you decide you are interested in making a change, please give me a call, send me your resume. And I've got to tell you, that was on a Sunday, and the next day was a Monday. And I made that call and I sent him my resume. My thinking was, look, I'm still early in my career. I have time to give back and to be in government service and also to really further my litigation skills.
And so you came in as an assistant state attorney, or you worked up to that role at the Cook County State Attorney's Office. A little bit of there, and then you transitioned to the state of Illinois. I'd love to hear more about that journey.
Sure. Thank you for asking. I spent maybe 3 years at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. And then actually one of my contacts reached out and said, listen, I'd love to have you over here at the state of Illinois. Can you make that happen? At the time, I was about to go on to felony review at the Cook
Mm.
County State's Attorney's Office. So I got through that and loved it, but decided, this is a great time for me to take that opportunity and move over to the state of Illinois. And that's what I did, a different governmental environment, focusing on, different issues and expanding my portfolio, so to speak.
Yeah. And was the role immediately to land as deputy GC for, as you called it, Central Management Services?
So that was after a few years.
Okay.
There was an opportunity to go from the Illinois Department of Public Aid to Central Management Services as a deputy general counsel.
And Meredith, for you, did leadership something that came natural to you? Were you attracted to it? Were people calling you into those roles? Tell me a little bit about that journey for you.
That's a great question, and I think that I probably am attracted to that role. I do enjoy sharing my opinion, but more than that, I do like helping other people and trying to help them realize their goals. And so, after a few times of people approaching me saying they'd like my advice or how could they get to the next step in their careers, I sort of took that as a sign that yes, maybe I should be helping others in that way and being a leader. Um,
So, with your deputy GC role, Central Management Services, give my audience a little bit of the scope of that role because I think it had a lot of responsibility.
so it did. What it meant was being the counsel for approximately 45 different state agencies.
Okay.
Um, and I don't have the exact number, but it was a huge spend every year. Um,
I think you
And
shared 15 billion to me at one point.
15 billion. Yes, so 15 billion. So
It's a lot.
all the procurement for all of those state agencies would ultimately funnel through my office
Wow.
for approvals and advice. And it was really interesting. And you know, even though it was centralized, there was an element of decentralization. And so, sort of getting buy in and cooperation from 45 different state agencies, um, was often interesting and challenging. Um, so that was a fun challenge.
And so I know that you had put about 6 years in at the state of Illinois and then you transitioned to Accenture. And you were doing state and local government work. What was that looking like?
Sure. So, interestingly enough, what let me kind of give you a little bit of background of what that role was.
Hmm.
So, for instance, the business team at Accenture would bid on an RFP. So, work coming out of state and local governments. Michigan, for example, you know, bid on a multi-million dollar contract for work for technology systems and consulting. So I would help them respond to the RFP, request for proposal. And if they did get the business, then I would help them draft and negotiate the agreement with those state agencies or local
Okay.
governments.
Okay. And was it all just Illinois focused with what you were doing?
Actually, no. As a matter of fact, because of revolving door, I had to stay away from
Ah,
Illinois and anything in Illinois for a certain amount of time. So it had to
yeah.
be outside of Illinois.
Okay. That sounds like good separation of duties or regs that are important to have.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this transition into a role that in an entity you've been a part of for quite some time. Where did this invite come from, and how did the door open for Alliant Credit Union?
So very interesting. For me, it was very interesting. It's all word of mouth and referrals are always the best thing in the world, no matter what, for any reason, I always feel. And, you being a top-notch, stellar reputation, search professional, you'll appreciate this. I was referred to a very good recruiter, executive recruiter, and I met with the individual. And actually, before I even met with him, he called me and he said, I received your resume. When can you come in and meet with me? It was a Friday afternoon. I said, I could come this afternoon or I could come Monday. And he said, let's talk Monday. He said, come to my office on LaSalle Street in Chicago. I said, terrific. So I walked in, and you would love this person, by the way, Chris. And there must be sort of a common theme about recruiters in the legal field because super warm and friendly and um so I walked in and he said, Meredith, it's nice to meet you. You won't believe this, but I actually have the perfect job for you. Who says that? Oh my gosh. So he said, I want you to read this job description, the summary. So I took a look at it and I said, it is the perfect job for me. You're exactly right. It was associate general counsel, ethics officer, somebody who has litigation experience, somebody who has extensive contract experience, creativity, innovation, leading others, um, familiarity with state and local rules, regulations. I mean, all of the things that sort of had been the backbone of my career, layered, of course, because I didn't get all that experience at once, but over years, all in one package on one piece of paper. And he said, "Shall I submit your name?" And I said, "That would be fantastic. I would love that."
So, divine intervention, the perfect opportunity with a recruiter knocking on your door, and here's something. So, um, when you landed at Alliant, um, I mean, they were a much smaller organization than they are today. Can you give some context to maybe some of the growth? Because you've been there for 17 years, is it, or longer now?
15.
15, excuse me.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. So when I came in and, Alliant obviously used to be United Airlines Employees Credit Union. But by the time I came in, it was Alliant, and it was about $4.2 billion in assets with about 200 employees, maybe fewer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And now we're at $18 billion in assets. And I think the latest number I heard was over 800 employees.
Wow.
And of course, we're a fully digital credit union bank with no branches. So the growth has been tremendous, both in terms of assets, employees, customer base. We're up to over 700,000 members, which are our customers. It's
Wow.
member owned. So it's been, digital transformation, um, increased in sophistication, but the bottom line is still it's all about our members. We're member owned and we focus on giving back to our members.
So you have been there for a while. You've seen outrageous growth in one of the largest credit unions in the country. The ranking where exactly you guys are you top
We're in the top 10.
10? Okay.
Hmm.
And you've had some other roles in the organization. I'd love for you to share. So I know you took on an interim role within HR. Love for you to share that, and other unique projects that came to you.
Thank you. So, yes, there was a stint of about 3 months where within the past year and a half, where I was asked to take on interim HR, and it was a fascinating experience. I loved it. I mean, I had always had a close connection to we call human capital because I'm a service provider, a consultant for human capital, obviously. But to actually kind of get in the weeds and see how the sausage is made really gave me a greater level of appreciation for what they do every day, number one, and how challenging that role is, that entire team, from benefits to hiring to talent management. Um, but it also gave me a greater sense and depth into the organization.
So, and then you also created or founded the first employee resource group. What is that, and how did you go about that?
Yeah. So I think this goes back to maybe 2017 or so. And one of my business associates here, another female in the business, approached me and a newer employee and said, listen, I see there are no employee resource groups here. And isn't there a forum for women to come together and share ideas and best practices on being in the business world? And I said, gosh, it's always been sort of organic and but now that we're growing, I think that's a really interesting thought and it makes sense. So we together did due diligence. We went out and spoke to other companies, to law firms who had, stood up ERGs, and got some great data and information, and we put together a business case. And then we went to human capital, we went to the executive leadership team ultimately, and presented our business case and pros and cons, and why we are supportive of a ERG, starting out with one that focuses on women's growth in the workplace and pathways to leadership. So it was accepted. It was accepted right away. And we started off, created a committee. Um, our first kickoff panel, I believe, was in 2018, where we had several female members of our board of directors on the panel and several female leaders. And it was in front of all the employees. And it was such an invigorating, energetic panel that we went from there and we've done many programs over the years. So now we are up to 5 to 6 ERGs at
Oh, wow.
Alliant. And so it's really been an interesting, fun thing for our culture here.
Um, Talk to me about a big accomplishment you shared around this multi-year effort, um, because of going over the threshold of 10 billion, and the regulatory requirements for that.
Great. So going back to the Dodd-Frank Act, which put in place the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a number of years ago. As soon as that institution or bureau was created, it focused immediately on consumer protections. Very important today. And what it did was it said, hey, look, if you're a bank or a credit union, once your assets reach $10 billion, you're going to be subject to more scrutiny. And we, CFPB, are going to be an additional regulator for you, and we'll come in and do exams. So we knew back when we were probably $7 billion in assets that we would be reaching 10 billion one day. And so immediately we set to work. And, I led an initiative that looked into what that means for us. How will our institution change? How will our business change? And we did bring in a few consultants to work with us to sort of analyze what we're doing and what we would need to change. And so it was a massive, not only undertaking, but our structure changed as a result of it. But at the end of the day, I think it was good for business that we made the changes we made. We always want to do something when we say, what do we have to do for compliance? I'd also like to be able to say, not only are we doing this for compliance purposes, but at the end of the day, it's going to make the member experience better.
So you had shared a couple of other things that were important for this journey for you. There was a CEO transition in 2021. You've been a part of the board in a couple of different ways, and you also were the president and still are of the foundation. So we'd love for you to elaborate on those 3 points.
Great. Well, let me start with the foundation.
Okay.
It's really sort of one of my prides and joys. Back in about, I'm going to say 2008, the current Alliant board, the board back then, said, you know what, it makes sense for us to provide some seed money for Alliant to start a foundation to do good in the world. And so myself and another individual in the finance department were charged with doing research, again, due diligence. You'll see a theme here. Um, and doing the research for, how do you start a foundation and all the steps involved. So we did that, and then we created a foundation focusing on mainly financial literacy. The foundation has grown over the years to the point now where we're focusing quite a bit on digital equity and inclusion, how to get laptops and broadband to people who don't have it, going to school, doing banking, getting medical help. So much is now focused on digital. And if you don't have a computer or a laptop or access, it's going to be challenging. So I'm happy to say more about that if you want me to.
Yep. Feel free if that's where you want to continue. Go ahead.
Okay. What I will say about that is we did a very exciting promotion this spring where the Alliant Foundation board decided that it would do a $250,000 challenge. And we invited grant applications and said, hey, look, we're going to give out grants totaling $250,000 focusing on digital inclusion. Do you know, Chris, that we received over 100 grant applications totaling over $4.5 million?
Wow.
And ultimately, we ended up giving out grants that totaled about 329,000
Okay.
to various organizations. So I'll stop there, but really excited about that work.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting that the foundation and the union, the credit union, has such an influence in that space. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Feel free to, if you want to address, I mean, we can jump into some other themes as well. What I will say is, I know one theme that's been very important for you is finding solutions to challenging issues. So I don't know where, if you want to share about an issue that has come up and you've had to find solutions for.
Great. I mean, some of the things we've talked about recently, actually, during this podcast have been focusing on solutions. But there have been some other things. So one of the solutions that I think my team has worked on that I'm most proud is, well, let me tell you what that resulted in: an amendment to the Illinois Credit Union Act. So
Wow.
under the Illinois Credit Union Act, prior to last May, credit unions could not invest directly in fintechs.
Hmm.
So together with my team, we came up with a solution to change the Illinois Credit Union Act. Now, key to this, key partners with us is the Illinois Credit Union League, which is our trade association here in Illinois.
Okay.
We pitched the idea to them exactly a year ago. It was last November. We sat down with them at our offices and pitched the idea to them. And at first they looked at us and said, I don't know, we don't see this, getting buy-in. And we said, give it some more thought. We really think this could apply to almost every credit union in Illinois, and it's vital in so many ways. So they came back. They said, okay, we're willing to give it a shot. Can you work with us on language to revise and amend the Illinois Credit Union Act? Kudos to them. They did a phenomenal job negotiating with all interested parties, and it resulted in an amendment that the governor signed off on in May of this year. Now, credit unions in Illinois are allowed to invest directly in fintechs.
That's
So
exciting.
it's so exciting, and we have already made a couple of investments.
I imagine you had some stuff teed up in a pipeline.
We did. Yeah.
So I mean, that kind of goes along with your next theme, just this idea of being futuristic and looking ahead. Obviously, that has allowed for you to do that, which is exciting. Um, I mean, does the credit union foresee growth by acquisition into fintech?
Not necessarily. I think right now we are focused on investment and partnership,
Mhm.
learning as much as we can learn, also helping. Obviously, it's in line. It's actually in line with what the foundation does. So I think it's all integral. Um, but at the moment, we don't see acquisition on the horizon yet.
Meredith, let's talk about developing people and maximizing talent. You're passionate about that. I'd love to hear how that's been a part of your leadership style.
So I am. I mean, I do feel that everybody in the world has untapped potential, and I think we use so little of it that we have. I mean, the sky's the limit. I think sometimes people are their own worst enemies and they talk themselves out of things, or they let fear get in the way.
Mhm.
And that's normal, that's natural. But how can we get beyond that? And how can we help people who work with us try to achieve that? One way is to, create development plans, which is all part of our human capital system. But there are other things too. I think there are things on a daily basis, just by encouraging good work, and being good human beings, saying hi to people in the hallways. It's just basic things like that, sort of common courtesies, knowing that you care about somebody. We do the Gallup Q12 every year,
Okay.
and that gauges the company's how engaged their employees are, and we do have a very good company score, first of all. But I'm going to brag a little bit here. My team is one of the highest in the company, legal and audit, at 4.90 out of a 5.0 scale.
That's awesome.
And again, it could change every day. I know that's a snapshot in time, but the individuals that are on my team are such high quality people and caring people. Um, and 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 by the way, that goes into how important hiring is and looking out for the right candidates, as you know, Chris. Um, so also going along with that, weekly one-on-ones are important. Sometimes we get busy and we can't have them, but as much as possible to try to have that personal connection, to connect with individuals on the team, I feel is important.
Meredith, for you, where did this desire to develop people come from, maximizing the talent that you have? Do you feel like it's something that's been just inside of you, or there's been influencers in your life, or books, or people?
Oh, I think there have been many people. I mean, people, teachers in grade school and high school and college. My parents were huge um, in the concept of, basically you can accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. They weren't the kind of people that said everybody gets a trophy. It wasn't like that, but it was, what, with hard work and determination, you can really accomplish a lot, you know. And so I feel really very fortunate and grateful that my parents had that mindset and instilled a work ethic, but also sort of this hopeful idea of like a hopeful future, if you will. Sort of like the title of your podcast.
The future is bright.
That's right. The future's bright.
For you, Meredith, I know that you shared that volunteering is an important part of your life and you spend time doing it. I'd love for you to share with our audience what you're doing with that and how you're encouraging others to do it too.
Great. So some of the volunteering is centered around the Alliant Foundation.
Okay.
I'd say that, a lot of satisfaction comes from going through grant applications and really trying to visualize how that's going to help real people every day. So sort of hands-on. I great satisfaction out of that. And then there are some other entities that I also volunteer with, and one is Fenwick High School. My son went to Fenwick High School. I'm on the board of directors there. I get a great deal of enjoyment in knowing that I'm helping to shape the future of the academic success of the kids at that school and going forward to future generations. Um, Involved with some bar associations, um, so some diverse organizations.
Meredith, how can people find you, contact you, follow you on social media?
Great. You know what? I am on LinkedIn and I love LinkedIn. So that would be a terrific place to connect. I would welcome it.
Wonderful. Meredith, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Chris, thank you. I am absolutely grateful that you invited me. And this has just been thrilling.